Welcome to Beyond the Classroom. Today's guest is Kate Parsons, certified professional coach, certified recovery specialist, and founder of the Brightening Center. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, Diana. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's jump right in and get started here. You originally, in your first career, were a program director for a major pharmaceutical company for many years. This is a second career for you. Tell the viewers how you got interested in the mental health industry.
So I was in pharmaceuticals for 34 and a half years, so yes, a lifetime I was there. I started there when I was 18 years old, coming out of high school. I had no direction, no real passion for anything, and I started there, and what I didn't know at the time is that the reason I had no direction was that I had an undiagnosed, unknown anxiety disorder and complex trauma. And I really struggled with a sense of identity and who I was, and it went untreated until around 1997. I was 37 years old, and I had just come back. Really, career was soaring. I was over in London for 5 years working, and unfortunately, I had also, which also happens with anxiety, I ended up with a substance use disorder, and I was drinking quite heavily over there. And culturally and for society, it was very accepted, just as long as you didn't drive. And when I come back here to the U.S., it was a different culture, and it wasn't as accepted, so turning up to work under the influence or hungover was not acceptable. So I ended up going to treatment and when I was 37, and I had a great recovery experience for 12 years. And in 2009, I had a major life event happened, and at that point, my anxiety really skyrocketed. I was unable to function. I couldn't get out of bed, and I was dealing with panic attacks and not understanding what was going on. So I sought treatment at that point for the anxiety, and at that point I was diagnosed with complex trauma and a generalized anxiety disorder. And I began my work at that point and was in extensive amount of treatment 3 times a week, going to therapy and getting the help I needed. And at the same time that was all happening, I had enrolled in IPEC, which is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, to become a coach. I was a leader in pharmaceuticals, and I wanted to be a better leader, so I found coaching. And what I didn't really know until I got there was what really the whole purpose of me being there was for myself. And it really transformed my life and helped me with finding myself and understanding who I was and the authentic me. And I ended up knowing that I needed to make a major change in my life. And at that point, I started to make my plan in 2013, and I executed that by leaving my current job and becoming a coach and working with individuals and helping them to be the better self. And through that process, came to find that all the professional people that I was supporting also were dealing with mental health and or addiction. So I went and got further certifications in order to be able to support them in a more effective way.
Yeah, that's fabulous. What do you think the stigma is around mental health, and why do you think it's there to begin with?
It's a great question. I get asked this question a lot. I don't necessarily think I have all the answers, but what I do find in my experience in this industry so far and working with people and their families is that there seems to be a stigma attached to something that you did wrong in your parenting or as a teacher, that you messed up, and also this idea that people with mental illness are dangerous or they're self-inflicted. They cause the problem. They somehow, became this. And really what it's really about is challenging those mindsets and helping and educating people. We really need to educate people around what is mental illness and how can we be supportive and give them skills in order for them to be able to be supportive to them. And so what happens is that as a result of things that have happened in a person's life, it could come in the form of physical sexual or emotional abuse, could be physical or emotional neglect, or it could just be dysfunction in the home, where there might be a divorce, there could be substance use disorder in the home, there could be some incarceration, any number of things that could happen, or it could happen at school or happen, on the playground. But there's some type of an event that could happen that could result in individuals having some type of effect in their life that creates coping mechanisms that is not effective and effective strategy in helping individuals to cope. So I think that there's a lot of stigma there. And then on top of that, treating it is really complex.
Sure.
So you have a physical symptoms, right? You go to the doctor, and pretty much so, unless it's a kind of a rare illness or aggressive cancer, the protocols are pretty much so laid out. And how do you treat that? With mental illness, it's not as black and white as that, because the brain is so complex. Right. And like I always like to say to my clients is that it's an organ. Don't personalize it. It's an organ in your brain, and it's complex. It's one of the most complex organs in our brain. And we need to have personalized care. In order, you may have symptoms, but it's not very quick to be able to say, oh, well, this is anxiety, or this is depression, or this is bipolar, or this is ADHD. It's going to take some time and personalized care in order to properly treat and support. Look at me, substance use disorder. I was treated for 12 years, and here I had an anxiety disorder and a substance use and trauma, complex trauma associated with that. Right. So it's a very complex topic, and I think that it's just a matter of people not understanding.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think that there's always an underlying, we like to treat the surface instead of going about 2 or 3 levels deeper and seeing what's the root cause of what's actually causing the things that come up. And we don't always do that well, especially in this country. I feel like we kind of gloss over mental health issues. As an educator, I have seen a major increase in mental health issues in my students, in other teachers and faculty. What is an adverse childhood experience, and what can we do to address that in a more effective way that we can really get our children to thrive?
Yeah, that's a really new term that everybody's hearing a lot about these days, right? ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. That's been around a long time. It's just now it's getting some momentum. A lot of the medical field now are starting to align it and associate it to physical illnesses like diabetes and heart disease. So I think that now they're also starting to recognize that certain events that have happened, as I spoke about, physical abuse, in the home, neglect, or just pure dysfunction, that is causing a lot of what we're seeing. And if you have adults who have had their adverse childhood experiences that did not get treatment, like myself, I am unknowingly creating more of those adverse experiences for our children. So I think the numbers are now 1 in 7 children experience some type of abuse or neglect in just last year alone. Wow. So it's a big number, and it's a big problem, and we do need to address it, because some people will grow through the traumatic experience, but others may not, and may get stuck and have their own issues with mental illness and violence and support. So I think the numbers, just some statistics here, 28% of children have experienced physical abuse. 27% of children have experienced substance abuse. 13% have experienced domestic abuse. 20% experience sexual abuse. They're big numbers.
They're big numbers.
And to keep saying that, oh, mental illness is somebody else's problem, those days are gone. We can't continue to put it under the carpet, because it needs to come out. We really need to address it.
Yeah, and I wonder, do you think the stats were always that way? We just didn't report it, or we didn't have the mechanisms that we have in place today to talk about it or report?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't think I have the answer to it, but I think that's a great question. I think this stuff has been here for a long time. Certainly, I'm in my generation, now that I'm in my late 50s, and talking to my other friends, we're all like, wow, yeah, that stuff happened, and we just kind of ignored it.
Absolutely. I would say my generation as well. I mean, nobody even talked about PTSD. Nobody even knew, it was for veterans.
Veterans, exactly.
And it just really, within the last 15 years, has kind of come more mainstream.
Yeah.
So I often wonder to myself, are these stats all that different? Or is this a problem that has been going on for years and years, and we're just starting to recognize and acknowledge the levels?
Yeah, I have to believe that it was there back, when immigration was big, right? And it still is, right? So back in the time when my father came to this country, and poverty that was there, and both parents having to work and children not being taken care of, and
So you're a professional coach, as am I. How do you support people that have mental health issues? Because I know for myself, I get asked a lot, well, are you a therapist? Or what's the difference between therapy and coaching?
Yeah. So in order for us to really change the climate around mental illness, we really do need to build resiliency. So it's all about resiliency. How do we help children to learn how to regulate emotion, how to defer gratification, things that they never learned when they've been abused and neglected. So coaching is all about helping people to be their best self and their authentic self. So that's what I love about when I started first in my coach training of becoming someone who helped people to be their best self, which is all about resiliency. So that's the normalization of what we need, where we need to get to in terms of how do we help every individual to be their best self. And that starts with what coaching does is just helping people to build skills, right? So we have to help individuals to learn more adaptive coping mechanisms and have a toolkit that they can use, especially children at this point, and being able to do that regulation and tolerate stress and so forth. But we need to train the teachers and the coaches and the parents and other adults that are in their lives to have that same resiliency. Absolutely. So when I started coaching, as I said earlier, individuals with mental health, I also when I was coaching them as professionally and they had mental health, I recognized that I needed to get further training. So my coaching alone is great. It provides me with the ability to do life skills like how to manage in your career, how to look for a job, how to manage a budget. But what it didn't do is help me with how to help somebody that has trauma or a mental health disorder. How we address that is very differently than how we would address somebody who's not. So I went through a lot of training. I got a lot of training in establishing my skills in mental health, first aid. I'm a certified mental health first aider. I went to Villanova and got my certificate in alcohol and drug counseling, validating that I didn't want to be a counselor or a therapist. Definitely wanted to utilize my coaching, and that's when I became a certified recovery specialist. And the biggest difference is, well, actually, I should say there's a lot of overlap between therapy and coaching. So a lot of people want to always say that that's very, very different. It's not. The work that I do today at the Brightening Center that you mentioned that I founded is a team of both therapists and coaches together. And as we worked together and started to flesh this out, we came to realize that there's a tremendous amount of overlap. Yes. But what's really awesome about the coaching component is the flexibility and the accessibility that we have in being able to meet a client right where they are. So if a client can't come into the office to meet, I can actually go and meet them for coffee. I can go and come to their home, which some therapists can do, but I have a lot more of that flexibility to be able to do that. What I don't do as a coach is I don't treat trauma, and I don't diagnose, do assessments, and do any type of analysis on an individual or explore any of their emotions. I help them identify an emotion, but I don't help them to explore that. And that's the really clear delineation between the two. Yeah, so therapy is so important, but the coaching component is just equally as important as well.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I agree 100% with everything you just said. And I think that clear delineation helps people to understand what they need or where they need to go next, which is critically important for somebody that has suffered trauma. They think they need a coach, they show up, it turns out they need either a combination of both or they need to be referred for therapeutic care.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important as coaches. I feel a tremendous responsibility in having that clear delineation to best serve my clients, really.
Yeah, and the other beauty about the coaching piece, which we have used quite a lot at the center, is individuals, parents may come in and say, my child really needs therapy, but she refuses to come into therapy because of the stigma that's associated with it, right? Sure. So we can say, hey, how about working with a life coach?
Right.
And that's a great gateway into helping them to then get into therapy, because they come in to see me, and then I start to help them to understand, hey, you got some other stuff going on, build rapport and trust, and then can introduce them into a therapeutic relationship and can go with them. You know, I've gone into their first therapy or first 5 therapy sessions with them, in helping them to get through that stigma. So it's a great tool.
So let's talk about the Brightening Center. It's an amazing place. So you founded the Brightening Center in 2016. Tell our viewers, what is the Brightening Center? What are the services that you offer?
Okay. So yeah, the Brightening Center is definitely something that came about a couple of reasons. One, selfishly, because I was a coach now, trained in helping individuals with mental health, and really felt exposed there and vulnerable in that area because I didn't want to cause any harm. All the training I got, and I really came to understand that the work I do is really important, but it is also really important that I don't cause any further harm. So I really had a vision of bringing together a team kind of approach. I used to always hear about Cancer Treatment Centers of America, right? You go in, you get all these treatments, and then for me, when I was going through my own treatment, it was like I'm down in Florida in bubblegum carpeted hotel rooms. I wasn't treated very much so as though I meant something and I belonged. And I really had this vision of wanting to create this environment where people could come into and can get what they get at Cancer Treatment Centers of America, which is that whole care piece, right? The whole body, mind, and soul piece. So that came about in wanting to establish a team. We call it the Interdisciplinary Care Team, which is around how to take an individual's case and have 8 practitioners that we have now look at the whole person and say, okay, vibrational sound therapists we have on board, massage therapists we have, the coaches that are there, therapists that are there to say, how can we create a care plan and treatment plan that's going to help an individual to get their best self. So we have, the other thing that's really important at the center is we have a lot of community focus. So we were the first to start refuge recovery in this area. And that is now called, the community has shifted into what's called Recovery Dharma. And that is a program similar to AA, but is Buddhist-based and is a trauma-informed program. So everything we do at the center is very much so focused on the individual, the community, and trauma. So everyone that practices at the center, that comes into the center to interact at all with our clients, all need to go through, have had or gone through some type of trauma training.
That's wonderful. What are the benefits that you hear from your clients? Like, what are the results that you're seeing? Yeah, so results are a hard thing to measure, and because everyone, as we said before, it is such a personalized treatment plan. But what we have found is a lot of community is growing. We have a huge community at the center. We also have a lot of therapists in the area that have been working with clients for a long time and not able to help them to shift into the direction they're wanting to go to. And have been inpatient treatment, and that has not been effective as a result of their trauma, are sending them to us. And as a team, we're able to create personalized IOP, intensive outpatient programs for them to partake in. So they're staying in treatment longer, is what we're experiencing as. So, because we can't speak to the people who left treatment in terms of how they're doing. We don't track like that. That's not something that we do. But we do know that people are staying longer, or we'll see them in the community when they come to attend a vibrational sound therapy session, sound bath, or they're attending one of the Recovery Dharma meetings or Al-Anon or anything else we're doing at the center. What are the different types of practitioners? You mentioned some of them, vibrational sound massage. What are they that go to make, who's on the team?
Yep, so on the team right now, we have Kanjana Hartshorn. She is the clinical director of Healing Hearts Wellness, so primarily they do all the therapy at the center. Along with her, we have Sarah Packler, and Kanjana's specialty is in yoga therapy. which is a great therapeutic approach to people with trauma, because a lot of times our trauma is pre-verbal and you cannot express it in words. So movement is a great way to be able to get to safety where words don't work. So Kanchan specializes in that. She also is a master Reiki, compassion fatigue practitioner. So she's one of the best therapists in the area. There's also a wait list for her. Sarah Packler on her team, her specialty is yoga as well, but with EMDR, which is a treatment for trauma. Ken Belden is on the team. Ken's specialty is mindfulness and a therapeutic approach called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is all based around values.
Okay.
In addition, on the team, we have Janette Patterson. Janette is our therapist as well as a family therapist at the center, so she works with the families. And in addition to that, she does DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy, but it is more for helping regulating distress tolerance, those types of treatments. So she runs a lot of workshops around that. She's one of the experts in the area on DBT.
And the coaches?
Yep, so we have 3 coaches, including myself. So I work with the individuals who are struggling with substance use disorder, and as long as they are under the care of one of the therapists at the center, I will also support them in other areas. So reinforcing some of the skills that the therapists are teaching throughout the week, and that's the beauty of the coach, being able to be on the phone on a daily basis. How are you doing? What's going well? What's not going well? Talking to the therapist. How can we adjust this? And so forth. So that's the work I do. And then we have Mary Franzoy, and Mary is working with the spouses of individuals with substance use disorder. And also mental health. She has a daughter who also was struggled with mental illness, so she has personal experience with that. And then we have Sherry Cowan, who's our adoptive family coach. Sherry is a parent of a son who's adopted, and she works with other families because there's a lot of attachment issues with and intellectual disabilities that are a result of the trauma that an adoptive child goes through. So she specializes and works with them. And then Mindy Hung is our vibrational sound therapist. She's licensed in Pennsylvania, and she runs all our sound baths, and she'll also is a great treatment for individuals who have trauma and don't like to be touched yet, where massage is not effective. So she will put the bowls on the body and play them, and that releases a lot of the toxins in the body and just takes you into a really deep level of relaxation.
Yes, it's lovely.
Yes, it is.
I've had it done before as well. It's lovely.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to something you talked about earlier, where you were talking about how we need to educate teachers and students, and we need to help everybody at every level of stakeholder in an educational community to learn more and be more educated about mental health. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and again, I'm the coach. I don't have a lot of training in this area, but just in us as talking as a team, because we work with COAD in Exton, who are providing a lot of those care services to the Downingtown School District. One of the things we talk about is how to help teach teachers how to regulate, help a child to regulate when the child is unable to, because a lot of times I think people tend to see that as a child acting out, and really what's happening is the child is not feeling safe. So helping them to build those skills. So maybe teaching some yoga poses that a child can just do in a chair, or a breath work that they can do that's safe. A lot of times people jump into meditation and yoga poses that aren't all trauma informed. So we really need to help and educate them on what type of tools can they utilize when a child is showing they're in distress, or they're unable to stop crying, or those types of things. But yeah, just providing that type of skill training. Yes. That this is just like you're teaching how to do a math skill, right? How do you help a child to regulate? And that's a lot to ask of teachers. There's a lot happening, but there's also a lot happening in the classroom.
Right.
And you know that better than
I do, and I would say yes, it is a lot to ask, but at the same time, what's the alternative? If you're there to powerfully serve your students, then you need to know how to best serve them to get them to where they need to go.
Absolutely.
And so what's the difference? I mean, like, I know it's a lot of work and you've already got a lot on your plate, but you really do need to know how are you going to empower and get the best out of them.
Yeah, especially when we hear about these schools, these children that are turning up at school that only have one meal, and that's at school, right? Well, poverty is one of the biggest in the ACEs in terms of how that affects their physical ability, let alone the trauma they continue to experience day in and day out. And not give, where else are they going to get those skills, right? And learn those skills, so they can't effectively learn what you're trying to teach if they're not learning how to regulate.
Sure, absolutely. Yes, that makes sense to me completely. What is your vision for the Brightening Center?
It's big.
Awesome.
So the goal was, and we're finally accomplishing it 3 years in, of really having the committed team. And all of us are giving up of our time. So when any client that comes into the center wants to participate in the team approach, they get to opt in, because it requires them to sign a release and opt into that service. And we dedicate our time once a week to come together and go over the cases that are on of the individuals that have opted in, to go through all that. So we finally have the team together that is working and committed to that approach. The next step is bringing in a nonprofit. So we're looking to start a nonprofit which is all about community. And we will have, the first year, the goal is around providing just education to the community on what is mental illness, some trainings for practitioners, training for adults that are working with kids, like, somebody in the Boy Scouts or somebody, soccer coach or whoever, and teachers that want to come and just teaching them how to, learn the skills they could use then to teach and help young people as they see them struggling and dealing with their own trauma. And then as we grow, as the years go on, and if we are successful and can raise the funding, we will then begin to provide programming for individuals around regulation, how to regulate, yoga therapy, more sound baths throughout the day. So pretty much every day have a program of something that's running during the day for individuals that are not working, that need to take care of their mental health, and services in the evenings and the weekends as well. So
wow, that sounds wonderful, and I look forward to seeing what direction you take and seeing you thrive and prosper with the Brightening Center. Again, it's an amazing, amazing space for people. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your experiences with us. That's all we have for today. This is Diana All, reminding you to take life's lessons beyond the classroom.